Hi everyone, welcome back to the next diecast. So many of you already saw my unboxing and review of this 1/18 scale Motormax Jeep Gladiator. Well, literally less than 24 hours after I filmed and uploaded that, I found this Welly Jeep Gladiator at a local CVS. So I picked it up for around $12. That was actually the sale price. I think these 1/24th to 1/27th scale models at CVS have gone up in price just a bit recently, but I think I even mentioned, or I thought, like after I uploaded the Motormax video, like, oh man, there's a Welly version. That's hard to find. Well, lo and behold, at this local CVS, they had 4 of these there. I went with the Gobi Sand. I think that's the color name of this. They also had a blue, a red, and I think maybe a silver or something there too. I'm not too sure. But now that I have both, budget 1/27 scale Jeep Gladiators, I can kind of compare the details of them. So I thought I would go ahead and do that for another video. So both these models you can currently find for sale, of course. Amazon has listings for both versions of the Motormax Gladiator. As I said in the video of this model, you get the Overland with the top off, and you get the Rubicon with the top on. The Welly version, they only make the Rubicon with the top on, but that's not necessarily a bad thing per se. The Welly Gladiator you can't really find on Amazon for some reason, but eBay does have listings of both of these models, and both these models apparently you can find at CVS and the Walgreens. I did get a message from somebody saying that they actually saw a Motormax Gladiator. I don't know if it was this particular version or if it was the Rubicon at their local, either it was Walgreens or CVS. I can't quite remember, but you can find both these models for between like the $13 and maybe $23 price range, depending on where you get it from, and if you get it, used or new. The Overland was from Amazon Warehouse Deals, and this one was from CVS, and it was on sale. So I guess I got deals on both of these, you could say. We'll go ahead and kind of take a look at the details of both and kind of compare the, finer detailing and everything. So right off the bat, Motormax makes the Overland and Welly makes the Rubicon. So there are some cosmetic differences in that sense. You have different styles of wheels on both. And of course, on the Rubicon, you do have the vented hood, whereas on the Overland, you have the regular hood. And you have two different paint colors, but the overall quality, I would say, of both models' paints are very well done. The Motormax has the proper, kind of matte finish to this green, and the Welly has the proper gloss finish to this beige. So both, I think both manufacturers did a good job in that sense with like the paint job and everything. The front ends of both models, I would say, are well done on both. Both unfortunately have just painted on turn signals, but they would be kind of hard to replicate those anyway, so I don't think that's a big deal. Both have, nice looking grills. You have kind of the metal grill in the front with a plastic radiator behind on each one. I think Welly's headlights are slightly better than the Motormax headlights. They have kind of a more like reflective quality to them, whereas these kind of have a little bit of a more fogged look to them. On the lower bumpers, the Motormax might have a slightly better detailed bumper because you have kind of the silver trim around these fog lights here, but that might be just a characteristic of the Overland trim spec. I'm not really too sure on that. And both bumpers are very solidly built. They're not going to, break off. The wipers actually on both models. On the Motormax, they're kind of just ingrained into the metal and into the windshield. They aren't like separate pieces, whereas on the Welly, you get 2 separate pieces for the wipers, along with that kind of reservoir underneath them. That's a separate plastic piece too. On here, it's there, but it's just kind of painted on and kind of ingrained in like the metalwork. So I think the Welly has a more like realistic setup than the Motormax in that sense. The mirrors are pretty much identical, although on the Welly they're a little bit more sturdy, I would say. On the Motormax they kind of bend them just a bit, but I think for both cases they're not going to be breaking off. And on these side profiles, you do have 2 different styles of wheels here. The Welly has kind of smaller rims and tires, whereas on the Motormax, you have kind of these big, beefy rims and tires. These might be actually a bit too, like, I look at these and the wheel wells on the Welly, and actually on the Motormax version too, and I see a very, there's actually a pretty sizable gap between between the tire and the wheel well on both models. So I don't know which one is actually more properly done. I mean, they both look good. I think they both go well with like the paint color and everything. This one you have like that kind of silver trim around the wheel, And then on the Welly, you have kind of that nice pattern with like the black and everything. But I'm not too sure on that, if one of these has kind of the wrong proportion or what. Because again, you do have kind of two different trim levels going on here too. And the badging is all well done on both models. You have the Jeep Gladiator badging on the Welly, and you have the Overland badging, or the Jeep Gladiator. Yeah, the Overland badging is on the back, actually. This is just the Jeep Gladiator badging. Sorry about that. But on both models, they're very well embossed on there. Welly has a little bit more of a reflective silver quality to it. Although I think the white does kind of stand out nicely with this kind of olive green color. Oh, and the Welly, you do actually have steering. I wasn't aware that they were still using steering on their 1/27th to 1/24th scale models. That's, kind of cool to see that. Because a lot of these 1/24th scale models don't have steering included with them anymore. But on Welly, it looks like they're still doing that. So that's a kind of cool, extra touch there. Taking a look towards the rear of both models. The insides of the beds are pretty much identical. Maybe a slightly better texture in the Welly, but not by too much. And on the Welly, you do actually have the opening tailgate. You just pull it up slightly like so, and then kind of push it down like that. The Motormax, you don't get an opening tailgate, unfortunately. But in terms of detailing, Welly doesn't do, they have separate taillights, but the lenses themselves are actually painted on. Whereas on the Motormax, you actually have separate taillights and the kind of the separate, clear red, like more, I guess, realistic looking taillights. I was kind of surprised that the Welly kind of had this feature as opposed to this feature. And on the Motormax, you will see how the Jeep badging is actually raised up with like the metal work, almost like an actual separate badge. The Welly has kind of I think a better look to it, but the letters aren't actually raised up. They're just kind of printed onto the rear tailgate back here. Both rear bumpers are pretty well done. On the Welly, you actually do get the tow hitch, whereas on the Motormax you don't. But I think the tow hitch is actually an option on the real Gladiator. So I don't think that's too big of a deal that they didn't include that on the Motormax here. Yeah, the only opening features you get on both are the opening doors, and on the Motormax, or on the Welly, you get the opening tailgate. But I think the Motormax's doors, I think the Welly's doors are better quality than the Motormax doors, but they don't open quite as far. Like, they're good quality to the point where it's kind of hard to actually open these things, if that makes any sense. And they do not open very wide, unfortunately. But I don't think that's a big deal because, these are going to be kind of more sturdy, higher quality doors anyway. But door panel detailing, it's pretty similar on both, just kind of a full black panel. There's not really like any painted on details per se. The Welly, I think, has a better texture. And they also include that kind of lower like net or pocket down there too, which the Motormax does not have. Or I think it's on there, but it's just kind of flat instead of like the mesh pattern. So that's kind of an interesting difference right there. The steering wheel and dashboards on both. The Welly, I think, has a slightly better steering wheel shape than the Motormax version does. Although on the Motormax version, you do have kind of more pronounced buttons on either side of that center portion there. That being said, the Welly has much better shaped seats, I think. The Motormax has kind of these weird, like, shiny, flattened backs to the seats, which look very odd. But on the Welly, they really do I think they do a much better job with the overall look of like the seats and everything. The center stack and center controls on both, yeah, they do have some detailing on both of them. The Welly maybe has a slight bit more detailing, but on both, they're just all kind of black. There's no painted on buttons or anything like that. I thought maybe on the Welly you would see a little bit more detailing in that sense, but at least like the shapes of the buttons, I guess, are a little bit better on here, but not by much. They're kind of similar looking, dashboards and center stacks, I would say. Though the Welly does have kind of a less shiny look to it, which is nice to say. And the back seat is well done on the Welly version too, although you can't see it too much. There's a better look at like the textures and everything and the overall shapes. Welly, I think, did a better job of the seats than the Motormax version does. So that's the only, I think, area where Welly scores major points is with the look of the seats and everything. On the Motormax version, they aren't really properly shaped and whatnot. And with the doors, it's kind of like, do you want to have wider opening doors, but also kind of like loose on dog legs? Or do you want to have narrow opening doors, but have, tighter hinges that aren't going to break? So I think the Welly does kind of score better in that sense too. But overall, it is kind of nice to, it is kind of cool to compare both models side by side. If these were 1/18th scale, I think there would be a lot more differences in terms of quality and everything. Welly seems to have much more amazing details compared to, like, other budget brands and their 1/18th scale lines. But at least as far as these two Gladiators go in 1/27 scale, the details are similar, but I would say that the Welly version is overall better than the Motormax version, but not by a whole lot. I think a better comparison, I guess, would have been getting the Motormax Gladiator Rubicon with the top on to kind of compare to this Welly Gladiator Rubicon. But overall, yeah, that was just kind of my thoughts on both models and kind of comparing the overall details of both of them. I hope this video was kind of helpful in seeing how these models hold up to one another and everything. And feel free to comment down below with your thoughts on either the Motormax or the Welly and which one you actually prefer. Thanks for watching.